Hi everyone, Richard Lewis here. Just doing a quick video. I had a few people on Twitter kind of message me and be like, you haven't said anything about this whole SpectateFaker nonsense. And I think that's because mostly other people have covered it quite well, actually. And sometimes it's redundant to add opinions when, you know, good opinions, informed opinions have already expressed stuff. Plus, I know from reading my Twitter feed, Thorin's going to do a video about it, probably is out tonight or tomorrow. We've already had a lawyer write an article on the Daily Dot. You know, how much more realistically can I add to this particular debate? So all I want to say first off, at the start of this video is, you know, I think everybody realizes that the DMCA claim by Azubu, you know, it's unjustifiable, really. For, you know, purely in the sense that it has no merit, just, you know, from a legal standpoint. Now, I totally understand why Azubu have done it, and that's not to say I'm sympathetic or anything like that, but I mean, you know, they're acting from a point of self-interest. This is how companies are. It's not shocking to me that this issue has arose. And again, should they have done it? Probably not. I think it's actually contributed a little bit to the Streisand effect, which, you know, is where you try and hide something and try and cover it up, but inadvertently draw more attention to it. I think the SpectateFaker thing, the stream itself was quite benign. It wasn't hitting big numbers, and now, of course, you know, it's become the talk of the subreddit. People saying we're going to withdraw support from Azubu. I mean, no one in League of Legends is ever going to organise a boycott of anything. That's abundantly clear. They proved that over the East Coast servers debacle. No one actually has the courage of their convictions. It'll never happen. It's an empty threat. But look, you know, the threat is being made. And that's something, I suppose. So there's some negative PR come out of it from Azubu's point of view. But ultimately, I imagine the stream has been getting bigger numbers, almost as a show of solidarity, where ordinarily it wouldn't have attracted anything at all had they not issued the DMCA takedown. Now, what I'm doing the video about is perhaps, I don't know if anyone else will touch this particular topic. Obviously, it's something that I talk about quite often. And that is Riot's stance in all of this. Now, here we go. Richard's going to go mental about Riot again. Well, you know, I don't think without cause in this particular instance. Yeah, hear me out. All right, let's see. You can turn off now if you want, but just hear me out. You know. So, for those that kind of been following the story, you'll have seen Mark Merill, you know, going off on Twitter, and. You know, this is the co-founder of Riot Games, and he's been saying some things that, I mean, first of all, I don't think initially he didn't even have a grasp of what the situation was about, and yet he felt compelled to go off kind of almost like half cock and talk about all of these things, which he clearly didn't understand the facts about. So I mean, that's always just, you know, you're on a slippery slope from the start if you don't, you know, inform yourself and understand what you're talking about, especially when you're a figurehead. You know, this is your business. It looks really inept if you don't know what you're talking about before you go public with a statement or whatever. So I was a little bit surprised actually to see him do something like that, because usually Riot are quite good with the whole PR thing. They usually get together, they have their little meetings, they talk about which way we're going to go with this, they bring in all the parties, and they trump out a message and say, this is the script, we all need to adhere to it. In this instance, I think they've been caught a bit flat-footed, and Mark Merill said some ridiculous things, frankly, which clearly show that he didn't really understand what the topic was to begin with. So I was looking at his Twitter feed, and, you know, I guess what this video ultimately about is, you know, their standpoint is that the SpectateFaker stream is wrong on some sort of moral level, and that they're implying quite heavily they're willing to change the rules retroactively, so the morality of what they're saying is wrong overlaps with the rules they've got in place, because currently it doesn't. It doesn't at all, in fact. Now, that's fine, but you know, there's something a little bit strange if you need to do that. And certainly some of the things he said, the hypocrisy is ridiculous. I mean, unprecedented levels of hypocrisy. So let's go through his Twitter feed here and talk about that, because I think this is important. So, Mark Merill, the first thing he said, this is February the 22nd, so this is yesterday, at the time of recording this video. This is his Twitter, you'll be able to find it. Pro tip for life. I mean, it's always nice, I think, when Riot, they're very obsessed with giving people these life lessons. I mean, that's a point, first of all, I don't want to labour it in this video, complete side issue, but they do love to lecture people about life lessons, morality. Every time I've interacted with a Rioter, they want to give me advice and make me a better person. So much about their company is, you know, let's make people better. Us Rioters have the power to do that. So, pro tip for life. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Don't be a rules lawyer. And he links to the Wikipedia entry of rules lawyer, which was, you know, I mean, again, it's not a term we really use in the UK. I don't know if it's in a US thing. I don't know if it's just some stupid, obscure term. You know, maybe someone lost a game of Monopoly and got upset about it. You did your rules lawyer. I don't know. I've never really heard it before. But anyway, it says here, if you're confused like me, a rules lawyer is a participant in a rules-based environment who attempts to use the letter of the law without reference to the spirit, usually in order to gain an advantage within that environment. This term is commonly used in wargaming and role-play gaming communities. Again, never heard it, and I'm as big a fucking nerd as anybody. But let's analyse that statement about not being a rules lawyer, because Riot fucking Games are the biggest rules lawyers out there. I mean, it's mind-boggling that he lacks the self-awareness. Like, please, someone get Mark Merill a mirror, because I'm aghast. Okay, so let's go back to August the 14th of 2014. When they said they were going to fine, Andy Reginald Din of TSM for publicly announcing the new support, Lust Boy, before the required registration paperwork had cleared. And Riot claimed they'd reminded him about you can't announce it, what was it, like 2 days, I think? So 2 days prior to the announcement, they allegedly told him, and they never provided any proof for this, despite Reginald saying, if you can provide proof for this in public, I'll pay double the fine, I'll give all of this money to charity, but please just prove that you gave me this warning. And they just ignored that. But anyway, so they said they gave him you've got to stick to the rules, this particular rule, you can't announce players, and they fined him for it. Now, he's denied, Reginald denied that the reminder ever took place and said, this fine isn't fair. And then when they were asked to cite the rule, the particular rule, Riot, they looked through the rule set and they were like, how can we make this stick? Because TSM are a huge brand, they got loads of fans, they're so important to what we do here, as we saw recently with the hype over essentially a nothing game between TSM and CLG, and how, record number of people viewing NALCS. And the only rule they could find was in section 10.2.14 of the official LCS rule set, which says no team member may refuse or fail to apply the instructions or decisions of LCS officials. Now that rule is meant for during competition. So if you're on stage and an LCS official tells you, take your hat off or sit here or take that off the desk, you have to comply with the instruction. It doesn't refer to this thing at all. And yet, predicated on a deliberate misinterpretation of that rule, they fined the owner and kind of shamed him publicly as well, as if to say, we're in charge, we know what's best for your organisation, fuck all you've done for us, fuck all the TSM brand has done for League of Legends, you're getting fined, somewhat derisory $2,000. I mean, it's piecemeal, it's nothing to Reginald, we all know that, but it's the principle, isn't it? It's the principle. It's somewhat embarrassing to be an owner and to be told you can't even announce what players are coming into your team unless Riot give you permission. Couldn't point to a rule for it. They've added a rule now, of course, but couldn't at the time. So guess what they were being? Rules fucking lawyers. You were being a rules lawyer. So I'm just aghast that you would even bring that to the table. That's an example that just sticks in my mind. I'm sure there are numerous others. I mean, their entire fine system, which, let's not forget, doesn't have an appeals process, which we'll talk about in a little while. all of that is rules lawyering, basically. Some of it has very, good merit. If you get fined for poaching or whatever, I think most people would support that. But actually, there's been, a number of fines where you're like, really, fine, sanctions, bans, banning players with no proof. It's ridiculous. So rules lawyering, yeah, apparently don't do it, but when Riot do it, actually there's some greater good at play. And that's just classic Riot insanity and doublethink. And I'm amazed he's even got the balls to say that. But anyway, so let's move on. He jumped onto Reddit as well, did Mark Merill. And he said, he posted in, I think it was the initial SpectateFaker thread where the guy said, I've had this takedown issue ordered. I don't think it's fair. Azubu don't own any of these assets, and I don't think they've actually got a legal right to issue a takedown order. Only Riot Games can do it. And again, Merill chimes in, and he's ignoring the issue and trying to make it about something else. And he said, you're rationalising and trying to justify the fact that you have singled out a player against their will and broadcasting their games in a way that he can do nothing about. That reeks of harassment and bullying. Azubu versus Twitch is irrelevant in my view. I do agree with him about that last part, actually. It is relevant. I don't think anyone was making it about Azubu versus Twitch, actually. I don't think anyone really does care about that. I think most of us are intelligent enough to understand Faker made a decision to go with Azubu. That was brokered by Kesper. It's very lucrative for all parties and desirable for Azubu. I don't think anyone's saying, we want to make... why couldn't you be on Twitch? Like, the level of discourse we're having... for once, as a community, is actually more adult than the perception about what people think we're talking about. I haven't seen an Azubu versus Twitch thread or anything like that, so I don't even know why that was brought up, but whatever. He continues, if you can't see how this potentially harms Faker and or anyone else in this situation, and please remember that for later in the video, then that is more reinforcement that we need to take the appropriate action to protect players from this type of unique situation. As to the comments about our API, of course we want third-party devs to do cool things with Spectator. Actually, you don't want third-party devs to do anything cool whatsoever, and there's a long-standing history of Riot. Whenever a dev does something cool, using their API, using their tools, they either muscle in, take the idea for themselves and say, oh, we were doing that anyway all along, thanks though, fantasy LCS or whatnot, or they say, wow, look at all this great shit you've done, this would be really useful, we're going to employ you, and then nothing comes of it, like I think the Wintermint client last year. So yeah, again, just an out-and-out lie there, but whatever. But when people utilize one of its components to harm, harass an individual, harm, apparently Faker's been harmed in all of this, to harm stroke harass an individual, then we need to potentially reevaluate our rules. Regarding comments about it's only because it's Faker, that's the only reason it is on my radar. Yes, if this wasn't top of Reddit and the original poster wasn't flaunting his leveraging of a loophole, then yes, I probably wouldn't have known about it. But if I did become aware of a similar situation, we would still act, albeit a lot less publicly. And again, remember that, because that's a lie as well, and I'm going to prove it. It's not cool to bully players, period. We've always had this stance. Now, again, this is a classic example of somebody when you come to an argument and actually the issue is so big and it's about this one thing that's actually quite technical, and you haven't ultimately got a leg to stand on. As we know, this SpectateFaker thing, we've had legal analysis look at it, and it's like, Riot are going to have to be quite stern and quite bold and set a legal precedent, and they'd have to be the people, the driving force behind issuing this change. Now, Riot don't necessarily want to do that, and I totally get why, because it would make them look bad to the community, and they definitely they definitely don't want to do that, do they? We know they're a very reactive company. Anything that's on the front page of Reddit, they feel compelled to react to and put in place. No, we're all about the community. We love the players. It's there in their ethos, their little mission statement. We want to be the most player-focused games company in the world. That's there front and center. So they don't want to do anything necessarily that's going to contradict it, but they're the people that have to. In this instance, you can't rely on your streaming partners to act appropriately with the whole community and the player base at the heart of the issue, because they've got to act from a point of self-interest, especially a company like Azubu, which are coming into a space which is dominated by, Twitch, one of the company who, I wouldn't say they've got a monopoly, I mean, that would be too harsh, but, they do dominate it. They've got an overwhelming market share, and Azubu are trying to make moves, and I said of the Kesper move at the time, it's actually quite a sensible move for them. It makes sense. So, they're trying to protect what they need to do to survive as a business. Now, fuck the rights and wrongs of it just for a moment. You can't then turn around and say to those people acting in that way and go, yeah, you got this, right? You've got to look at the legality of it, and the legality of it is that only Riot can issue this sort of takedown, and obviously they don't want to get their hands dirty. So what's Mark Merill doing? He's changing the debate. He's changing the debate for it to be something that it isn't about. This is not a bullying or harassment issue. This isn't. And you can find all of the people on Twitter, of which there are numerous, I have no doubt, that want to appease you, and you can retweet them as he's been doing. Congratulations to Mark Merill for standing up for the players. That isn't what's going on here. This is classic deflection. Classic deflection. Faker doesn't feel bullied. Pro players live a life in a spotlight. Now, I'm not going to say how I feel about, how would I feel if someone was broadcasting, my games, and if I was powerless to do anything about it. That isn't the issue that we're talking about at this particular moment in time. That's a side issue. That's a tangential issue. Perhaps that's an issue we can get to and we can talk about, and we can put things in place that do allow players to opt in, opt out, which as things stand would be terrible, and we'll talk about that in a little while. But the main issue is the legality of it. We need to get the legal landscape clearly defined. And you're not going to do that if you just make it about things it isn't about. Bullying and harassment, e-stalking. This is insane. This is an insane conversation to be having. Let's establish the rules first. Let's all behave like adults, all right? And, you're a co-founder of a massive company, $1 billion company. All right, let's not be hysterical, and let's just talk about the legality of it. For me, I'd be, actually, this is such a unique situation to gaming, and a unique situation to streaming. This is so esports. This is something that would never come up in a regular sport. How fascinating. Let's currently, as things stand, nothing illegal is taking place. We've got to allow the stream to keep going, but we're going to revise our rules, and we'd like to thank the SpectateFaker stream actually for kind of bringing this to our attention. And if the rules change and there isn't, as a result of that, there's a legal grounds on which to take down the stream, we apologise, but you will have contributed and you will have helped towards making a better environment for players by showing us this loophole that we can subsequently plug. Now, wouldn't that be a nice way of framing it? Wouldn't that be like a professional way? And I hate that word, but that's the professional language there. Why not just say that? But no, we're not doing it. And again, this is Riot. This is how they operate. So I want to rewind to when the post first went up, when the SpectateFaker thing first come up. And he got in touch with Riot, the SpectateFaker guy, Star-Lord Lucian, I believe he's called. And he got an email from Riot. And this is what I mean. People always say, Richard, you're so mean to Riot. You just make things up. And it's like, no. This is how Riot operate. They will try and coerce, bribe, or bully you if you have anything to do with League of Legends. And if you're an anomaly like me that exists without it, and they can't touch what you do, and they try, all they can do is make your life a little bit more difficult and try and discredit you. They'll go down that road. But ultimately, they think most people are in thrall to them, and they use that leverage. So he gets an email back from Riot. Now, bear in mind, he's gone down the proper road. The person that's streaming this SpectateFaker stream, he's got in touch with Riot directly and said, "Can Azubu do this?" And what do they say? They completely ignore the issue at hand, and they say, if you are going to stream another player's games, it makes sense to reach out to that player first, in this case Faker, and get their permission. It's simply the right thing to do. Why are we talking about ethics when we need to get the legality sorted first? And that's such a classic play, that appeal to, hey man, come on, we wouldn't do this. Do you want to be like Riot Games, or do you want to be an asshole? It's such a cheap trick to manipulate someone, on an emotional level. It's insane. And then obviously it goes on to say, raising the visibility of a person's match without their knowledge is questionable, because they may be assuming that they're just casually playing a game with friends, when in reality they're being broadcast to a larger audience. Now again, just want to point out, that's never made a difference. When Nuke Duck and Mithy got fined, $500 or whatever it was, and it was something that contributed to this perception about those players being toxic. They were actually in a private game with friends, and someone took a screenshot of them joking. The jokes were inappropriate and tasteless, but again, who doesn't say stuff, inappropriate and tasteless stuff among their friends? We all do it from time to time, and if you claim that you don't, you're either quite a pitiable character, and I genuinely mean that, or you're lying. But, that didn't stop them then. They didn't say, well, they didn't have the knowledge that the screenshots were going to be made public. No, they just didn't give a fuck. They just fined them. So, again, incredible hypocrisy across the board. So, let's move on. Next point. Oh, this one just gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. So, Mark Merill replied to someone who said, you're something along the lines of, you're only doing this because it's Faker, you're trying to protect your partners, the Zubu and Twitch, and help them maximize their profits or something. And Mark Merill replied with a tinfoil hat on, as if it was some broad conspiracy theory to imply that Riot Games might want to protect the interests of their partners. Broadcasting partners. Well, of course they do. That's not a fucking conspiracy. No one's saying that you shot JFK, Mark Merill. No one's saying that. We're just saying that you, as a businessman, may operate within the interests of business. And yet, despite that being a completely reasonable statement, he's trying to pretend that, I would never dream of that. I would never act within the interests of the business. Never. So you're wearing a tinfoil hat if you think a businessman may do that, apparently. He adds, what do you think our goal is, except to protect the current and future interests of our players? Protect the interests of players? I mean, really? Are we really going to do this? Like, are you going to put that out there and pretend that's Riot's modus operandi, that everything they do is about player welfare? Well, again, what about the streaming stipulations that you put in place because you got so scared of Hearthstone for some reason, and you were trying to prevent the players that made your game, as popular as it was, the high-rated streamers. Well, because I don't know why. I mean, it makes no sense to me. You try to take over control of their Twitch channels, which you have no dominion over whatsoever, but you got a little bit too big for your boots because you've had a good relationship with Twitch in the past. And again, as Brandon Beck called it recently, overreach. I mean, again, such a classic dismissive statement. We were just overreaching. No. If you even have the idea to try and control things outside your sphere of control, that's megalomania. It's not overreach. It's simple as that. Fucking accept it, deal with it, stop doing it. We know you won't, but just please. So how that would have hampered the income of the players, again, which I have to say were making your game, one of the reasons why it got so popular in the early days was you went out and you told everyone to stream it and, hey, how can we help you, and here's some money, and no. You went out and effectively bribed everyone to come over to League of Legends because it wasn't seen as a desirable game initially. It was seen as Dota for kids, and that was its perception, and you went out and you did all you could to change that perception by effectively, incentivizing people to play it and talk about it and broadcast it and say good things about it. You know, all the refer a friend shit that you did. And now you decided, well, what we're going to do is we're going to punish those people retroactively down the road by saying what games they can and can't stream. Yeah, insane. So those stipulations would have like hampered income, maybe even seen some streams shut down, you know, because they were in violation of you know, contracts. So all right, they changed that, Richard, though. Why'd you have to keep bringing that up? They changed it. Okay, well, let's look at LCS contracts and the exploitative elements that are contained within. I mean, you know, we've gone over this a few times, and you know, again, I don't want to labour the point. You know, obviously we did this at the Daily Dot. We got a contract lawyer in to have a look at the an LCS contract. And you know, there was numerous things in this which were troubling to the lawyer. So, for example, things like the limitation of liability clause, okay, which effectively alters the statute of limitations to such a degree that the lawyer we showed it to didn't even think it would stand up in court. And basically the statute of limitations, to put it in non-legal speak as I understand it, which could be completely wrong, and people can feel free to correct it. I'm not a lawyer, I don't claim to be, but basically, you know, you've got a certain amount of time to resolve a particular dispute. Once you move beyond that time, you no longer have any recourse. So they altered it to being down from the standard, I think, 3 years to 1 year, which again, that goes against what's on the statute. And also, it's little things like Riot only being liable towards like $25,000 if you get injured during an LCS stream. So like if a light fitting falls on a player's head and kills him outright because of negligence, $25,000, that's all that's happening. But you know, hey, we care about player welfare, guys, and we'll totally do the right thing. So you know, there was that, and then there's the you know, complete use of name and likeness of the players within for the purposes of advertising, which they can actually, according to an LCS contract, they can alter your image, even your voice, and use you beyond the realms of your contracts. If you're an LCS player at any point and you quit and you want to play another game or do something else, Riot can still use you for advertising. But hey, we care about player welfare. You know, there's so many examples where that could be like actually detrimental to a player's career. But that's in the contract. That's what you agree to if you want to you know, if you want to play. Then you've got the weird, vague, you know, clauses, like for example the good ideas clause, where if a player suggests a good idea that improves their game, they're owed nothing. They're owed nothing for it. But okay, you know, that's kind of getting a bit off the beaten path, isn't it? That's not really a welfare issue. So just it's just insane. I mean, the contract was described as troubling and worrying. And this is, you know, we showed it to you know, a few lawyers, not just the one that we went with for the article. So again, you would need to make huge alterations to an LCS contract if you wanted to actually say the player's interests are at heart. You know, I think it's very difficult, don't get me wrong, just to add a little bit of balance here. I think it's pretty difficult for a company that needs to act in its own self-interest, as we've talked about, and certainly in an environment where acting in their self-interest is going to help the sport grow and thrive and everything else. And you've got to come up with a contract that does completely right by the player. And I'm not saying that they necessarily should do that, but to claim that what you care about is player welfare, to claim that is the central, that's at the heart of everything you do when there's so much evidence to the contrary, that's what makes you ridiculous. It's that hypocrisy, that lie. And then on top of that, let's talk about the recent thing, MYM. I mean, you've got a player who's in an environment where he's being bullied, and I'm not buying this shit that it's one rogue manager. I mean, this is you know, there's a saying, isn't there? Shit rolls down hills, and we often use that in the UK to talk about delegation. You know, you delegate. Now, I think also there's a kind of cultural implication that if you're in a company, and again, when I used to be a manager, we used to call this behaviour breeds behaviour, because everyone talks in jargon in companies, and they all make little pithy, stupid phrases for everything, and you know, we can't just talk about things sensibly. We've got to have company mantras and, you know, jargon and all this shit. So we used to call it behaviour breeds behaviour, and that was the idea that one person at the top behaves in a certain way. You know, for example, if you see your CEO coming in and working overtime on a weekend when he doesn't have to, you on the next tier will be more inclined to do it, and then your subordinates will see you doing it, and it goes on, and you end up with a company that has that ethos through, you know, for good or ill. It's the same for negative behavior, it's the same for positive behavior. I mean, I wouldn't call working overtime positive behaviors. Companies fucking flog you till you die, but again, that's probably a topic for another video and not linked to esports. But you know, that's how it works. So the idea is you've got this pyramid of behavior, and whatever you do at the top as the figurehead will trickle down and become cultural within the company. Now, I totally believe that this is what's happening with MYM. Every chat log I saw, you know, the CEO is telling his players and his managers, this is what we say. I've talked to Riot, this is how we're going to do the PR. And in fact, you know, when the player made the threats to Corey, to the player in question, when you know, Sebastian Rotterdam did that, he was doing it because he was scared of losing his job. Well, why is he scared of losing his job? Why are people pretending there's a $50,000 fine for replacing a player? That's cultural. All of this is cultural. CEO Khalid Naim, he ran that organisation with an iron fist, and it's no wonder a player didn't feel comfortable within that environment. I'm sure all of them didn't. And let's not even get into the whole, you know, oh, is it a shell company? Why wasn't Super Hot Crew paid? What's going on? Why are the people that are now in MYM or formerly in MYM, why were they in this company called AK3 and they were responsible for payments and they didn't get the money? If you care about player welfare, right, first and foremost, you don't allow shady shit companies pulling these, you know, business tricks and loopholes themselves to come into your business, to come into your sphere of influence and directly impact negatively on players' finances. You've got control over that, Riot, and you do nothing. You do absolutely nothing about it. I've seen contracts that make me sick to the pit of my stomach. What some of these players get. It's unbelievable, and you allow the organisations to do it. Then, over this particular issue, the player contacts you directly, contacts Nick Allen and says, look man, this has happened, I'm really scared, I don't know what to do. And they go, yeah, don't worry, player welfare is at the heart of everything we do. We're gonna talk about this, and we're gonna sort things out. What do Riot do? They have a meeting with MYM, completely side with the organisation, limit the players' movement by saying, yeah, well, as long as there's a contract in place with MYM, we're not going to allow you to play for another LCS team, which, of course, that's a private dispute. That's between MYM and Corey, but Riot happily enforced that and stood by it. So they chose the organisation over the player. Clearly, it's not even up for debate. And then what do? You give them a $5,000 fine for threatening to take a player's mother's house because she's named on a contract. $5,000. And let's not forget that when Corey did his thing and allegedly breached contract, he got fined. Probably a few thousand anyway. He's paid for the bulk of that fine himself. Well, that's player welfare, isn't it? So seriously, Mark, I don't know. I mean, I'm sympathetic. You run a big company. Maybe you're not getting all of this. Maybe these emails aren't being sent to you. Maybe you've just, you know, decided to block out the few journalists left that will highlight the negative things your partners and people in, you know, getting your little circle are doing. So maybe you're not seeing this. I'll give you the benefit of ignorance. But to say that you've got a tinfoil hat on if you think that Riot's goals could be anything other than protecting the players, there is a fucking huge, overwhelming amount of evidence that show actually the welfare you truly care about is the welfare of Riot and, you know, Riot's bank balance. That's the truth. That's there in black and white. And this video's already too long. You're already at this stage and you're starting to flag. You're getting a little bit weary. So we need to move on because, you know, but I could come up with more. There's so many more. There really is, and that's before we even get into the private shit that doesn't even make it into the public domain. People are scared and they don't want to talk about it. So you don't prioritise player welfare at all. There's certainly nothing to substantiate that, and if there is, I'd like to see it. Now let's move on to the next thing he claimed: e-stalking. He used the term e-stalking. This claim, for me, is absolute. It's just insane to call it that because, okay, so players big name players, they must know. People want to watch them. People want to see them, and we'll try and see them as much as possible. If there's an option there, we'll absolutely utilize it. And part of the reason, again, why the game has snowballed and become so popular is because of the excellence of those players, inspiring people to want to be like that and to play the game more. And, maybe one day I'll do an outplay as good as Fakers. And this is driven into our faces. This is one of the central things behind Riot Games' success, and the idea we're all in one big league, one big ladder. We're all clamoring to be the best, whether we know or not. Even your fucking bronze 5 player, if he gets the bronze 3 in a season and he's never been out of bronze 5, it's achievement. You're climbing that ladder. It's all one big hierarchy. So if with all of that in mind, to imply that if I want to watch Faker play, I'm a stalker, that's a bit weird, isn't it? That's a bit of an insult to the fans. Now, if you mean specifically, I'm gonna watch. Okay, let's say this SpectateFaker guy was just spectating him, but wasn't streaming him. Is that an issue? Is that an issue? Because it seems to me the problem you've got is only when you hit broadcast. Because there's tools, and again we'll talk a little bit more about this, but there's tools in the client which enable me to click and spectate people's games, and they're not cognizant of it. Nothing, so you can say, oh, well, yeah, but you can click on anyone in your friends list. Now, just because they're on my friends list doesn't mean they've given me permission to spectate their games, but I've got the option. It's there. I can spectate if I want. People could accidentally accept. And I guess what Riot will say there as well, if they've accepted you into the friends list, they're basically saying it's okay for you to spectate their games. All right then, but let's say through the use of the API, I see what game a player's in, and I just want to watch him. I just want to watch him and see how good he is in solo queue. I'm not broadcasting it. I'm not streaming it. I just want to watch him play because. Maybe I've got work. Maybe I can't stay up and watch him play his competitive games. I just want to see him in solo queue. I want to get an idea about what surprises he might pull out in solo queue. And let's be real here. All of the top players, they're all watching anyway what other players do. Are they e-stalking? Are we all involved in e-stalking? You look and you see, well, he's been using this build on this champion. We should probably get prepared for that. Maybe he's going to pull that out in a competitive match, and we should have a strategy for it. Is that e-stalking? I don't know. Some people will call that scouting, right? Oh, so it's okay if it's a pro player now, but this is a ridiculous term. It's ridiculous. It's got nothing to do with the issue at hand. It's too complex to be just dismissed. That if you want to watch a player play, you're stalking him. I'm not stalking him. That's not what's going on at all. And it actually cheapens what some people have to go through when they are being e-stalked. It's a wretched way to sort of be dismissive about people that genuinely do go through some pretty harrowing shit when their name and address or whatever else gets put out on the internet, or celebrity culture, when people do actually have stalkers who turn up at your house and bake you a cake, and you're fucking terrified. You don't know if you're going to get murdered or whatever. And again, I'm trivializing it now, but I mean, I'm trying to illustrate what e-stalking actually is and what it looks like. I know loads of high-profile YouTubers who tell me they've been in some scary situations because people have overstepped boundaries. Spectating you playing a game is not e-stalking. It will never be categorized as e-stalking. To try and use that language to gain sympathy to your position is fucking pathetic. So just don't even bother with that. Again, just to use a real-life example, a lot of smaller football clubs, they allow fans to go and spectate the training sessions so you can see your players, how they're doing, how they're looking. Is that e-stalking? Are they endorsing e-stalking? Of course they're fucking not. Shut up, it's stupid. And then Mark Merill also tweeted, this feels like automated paparazzi. And again, I want you to think about what paparazzi are known for. It annoys me when people use the term as a catch-all thing for journalists. It shows great ignorance. Paparazzi are photographers. But, there's a sliding scale. A paparazzi, ultimately, I think we can kind of agree, this is the consensus of what a paparazzi does. They get photos of you that you ordinarily wouldn't want in the public domain. You simply wouldn't want it. You could be having breakfast on your balcony, and there's a guy in a tree 500 fucking miles away with a ridiculous zoom lens, and he's like, oh, look at Richard Lewis's new tattoo, or has Richard Lewis gained weight? Why is he eating that for breakfast or whatever? Now I'd be upset about that. I mean, and celebrities do get upset about that. People accept it. It's just part of... But, some newspapers make a stand and don't publish stuff like that. They don't publish the upskirt pics. Others do, and they enable those people to make a living. So, again, that is a complex issue. That's about media and boundaries. This has nothing to do with that. He continues, if a player wants to opt out from automated and targeted rebroadcasting, why should we not honour that? Because, well, here's why. Because there's no fucking rules in place. You haven't put any rules in place. And in fact, you're being massively contradictory there, Mr. Merill, because an option to spectate high elo players was built into your fucking client. You brought that in. It was a feature. You advertised it. Did you get the permission of all of those players? Those high elo players that were having their game spectated by Ronnie Randoms? Did you ask their permission? No, you didn't. You didn't ask their permission, nor did you put anything in place that when these players entered into an agreement, they were with you to play your game in your terms of service. You didn't put anything in there that said, if you ever go above a certain elo threshold, your games may be broadcast to everyone else who wants to watch. You didn't put that in there. So if you were so, if it was such a big issue to you and it's so close to your heart and you don't want to see people get e-stalked and harassed and bullied and all this other bullshit language you're using, why have you done that? Why have you put that feature there? It's completely contradictory to the central point of your argument, and it doesn't even end there. There was a Riot stream. Let me get this up. Because this is important, and I think we definitely need to go over this. Now, there was an official Riot stream, which I'm sure people remember, and it was in there for a long time, and it was called Timo Dies, Twitch TV / Timo Dies. I don't think it's ongoing anymore. But basically what it was they created their own... Riot created a spectate mode on Twitch, but it only picked up Timo deaths. So anytime someone was playing Timo and that person would die in a game, just the death, so just the shit bit, just the bit of you playing really bad and getting killed, would be broadcast on that Twitch channel. And it ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I think it ran for about a year, there or thereabouts. Now, I'm guessing here that Riot didn't go out and reached out to every bronze asshole who's playing Timo. Can we use your death? Can we... I'm pretty confident you didn't do that. And this just seems, again, this hypocrisy. You didn't care about it when you could make something cool out of it that made you look like you were a community-focused company, and Timo dies, we all hate Timo, right? It was okay then, wasn't it? It was all right then, but now it's not. And it just so happens that it's not all right now, and you feel strongly about it, when one of your broadcasting partners has created an issue and issued a false DMCA takedown. This is a copyright issue. This is all this is. Right? This is a copyright issue, and it's complex, and you're trying to make it about, all this emotional stuff, and you've acted, the complete opposite. You've acted completely contrary to the position you are now presenting in public. And it doesn't end there. I want you to think about the future. All right, let's say we do bring in these opt-outs. So in the streaming industry, top players stream games all the time, right? And obviously there's 9 other people involved. So even though I'm watching, say for example, Bjergsen stream or Dyrus' stream or someone else from TSM, because they've got that market cornered, right? Let's say I'm watching one of those players play, and there's 9 other players in that game. What if one of them wants to opt out? What if they don't want their play scrutinised? And there's actually a good reason for this from their perspective, because if we want to believe this bullying and harassment line, well, there are examples of how this does spill over. So, I don't know if you all remember, but again, it was on Bjergsen's stream, where Seraph, I think, rage quit a game. They camped him top. He'd been disconnected. He was, level 1 when everyone else was like level 4, 5. He went top lane and they just camped him and kept killing him, basically until he quit. And Bjergsen said, he won't be missed, and everyone laughed about it. Seraph was getting a real hard time. He underperformed for CLG. He wasn't in a team currently. People were giving him shit in the game, and everyone was like afterwards, haha, that's BM. But the player rage quit. And then there was a Reddit thread saying, I'm a high elo player. That Seraph rage quit video is the tip of the iceberg. He's toxic all the time. He rages at people all the time. Blah blah blah. What happens? Seraph has to come out and apologise for toxicity to the Reddit community because he doesn't want this negative perception about himself. And he has to admit that he's done wrong, and again, Reddit all come in finger wagging, these fucking kids who will fucking make your life miserable if you say anything they disagree with, lecturing people on morality, saying, well, Seraph, we're glad you've learnt your lesson, we're the moral arbiters here, and we're so happy to help you develop and evolve as a human being. Right? And Seraph has to eat that shit. He's give me more shit. And all because a pro player streamed his games. And this happens so often, where a top player will play a game and someone will feed, or someone will go on tilt, and someone will be bad, and he'll be like, this player's shit. He won't type anything into the game itself, into the client, but he'll be on stream saying, this player's shit, this player's an asshole. And that colours their entire reputation. And some of these players have their own streams that aren't quite as popular. Some of these players are subs, or they play in the Challenger League, or they're well-known, high elo gimmick players, whatever it is. And people get a negative perception about them because their favourite streamer, the person they're watching, is colouring their views about them. So what do we do? Do we say that's unfair? Do we say that leads to bullying and harassment? Because actually, that's probably the one example where I could think of where some harassment does occur. I've seen, players, like just low-level players, regular guys, folk like you and me, add a player after a bad game with a pro and flame them and abuse them and DDoS them. And all of that's happening because of streaming. Now, nobody's turned around prior to this and gone, hey, man, this could be an issue here. Streaming's pretty bad, we should do something about this. This isn't fair on those other 9 players, actually. Which, a broadcast is inherently biased to the person that's running it. We need to think about it. Now, you don't care. Streaming's been great for League of Legends, great for business, great for esports as a whole. So no one's tried to address that issue. Nobody at all has tried to address that issue. And now you're talking about adding opt-ins and opt-outs. Well, okay, how's that going to work? I mean, apart from the fact that it's laughable that Riot are going to make any changes to their fucking client anyway. I mean, that's laughable. We've been waiting for that for how long now? But alright, let's say you're going to roll out something super fast and it's going to be perfect. Well, I'm a streamer. I'm about to go into a game. 2 of the 10 players on the server have opted out of being streamed. How does that work? How the fuck does that work? I've opted in, they've opted out. Does the game go black screen? Does it go black screen whenever they come onto this? How are you going to make this work? It's insane what you're proposing here. It's got no practical value whatsoever. So again, I'm intrigued to see what you're going to do. But here's what you're going to do. I'll tell you what you're going to do. I know about this. You're going to basically change the rules so that nobody ever in the world ever can stream a player's personal private solo queue games without express permission. And that's all you're going to be able to do here, right? And that's fine. You're well within your rights to do it. And we all know why it's going to work, because obviously, Twitch, you can strong-arm Twitch, you can strong-arm everybody, and you Riot, and you do strong-arm everybody. Right? But, you're within your rights. I got to say, if you do that, and you do make that change, which I'm pretty confident you will, that's going to it's going to make things clear. I don't think it's particularly fair. I think there's lots of good that can come of it, and certainly Riot, I would urge you to write to every Teemo player for that Teemo Dive stream, and I would urge you to write to every player who's ever been featured in a featured game spectate mode and apologise to them for violating their rights. I think that's only fair, because we're now agreeing it was a violation. And you feel strongly about it. So, you should put your money where your mouth is, and you should offer them some form of at least an apology, or perhaps even a compensatory measure. That would be reasonable, wouldn't it? But, all that's going to come out of this is going to be just another layer of control, and it's kind of sad for a company that claims to be community focused, that a guy who's trying to do something nice for the community, and that's ultimately what we're talking about here. It may be misguided. Faker may not like it. But he was trying to make Faker more accessible, and I would argue there's benefits for that. Certainly not for Azubu. Okay, totally understand that. They've invested heavily to have Faker's rights and be able to broadcast Faker's games. So it doesn't work for Azubu, but for everybody else that wants to buy into this, idea of Faker being the greatest player of all time, which I think he certainly is, and wanting to watch him, on a schedule that suits us, in a way that suits us. Yeah, it wasn't malicious. And you're trying to character the guy who did it as being malicious. It wasn't malicious. It was never about that. It was about, it was a misguided effort to present to us, the community, something we could all enjoy. And it's going to get stamped out simply because it's blown up. And, on the one hand, I think it's sad, but Riot have got to make their position clear on this. And moving forward, we'll wait and see what happens. But at the moment, the proposed solutions are balmy. And because you've used all this ridiculous language, you've got yourself backed into a corner. And if you're going to end up doing some stupid things and saying some stupid things, it's quite clear what needs to be done to resolve the issue. Anyway, look, that's basically my video on Riot's hypocrisy on the SpectateFaker issue. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking around till the end. And I will, of course, see you next time.